are stories that connect us to ourselves and each other. These stories reveal who we are and show us the many vivid, wild colors of our truth. Welcome to Soul Wanderings, where we raise spiritual awareness and foster connections through these shared stories and personal experiences. And now, exclusively on KGRA Radio, I give you your host for Soul Wanderings Radio. Here's AJ.
Welcome. I am AJ Rasmussen, your host, and this is Soul Wanderings. It's a show where we receive an opportunity to hear journey stories from humans from all walks of life and all types of experiences. And these humans show up to share authentic pieces of themselves with all of us. It's always so good. So thank you for being here. We are live on video on the KGRADB Facebook pages and YouTube page. I should say Facebook page and YouTube page. You can also catch us on live radio here on kgradb.com. And if you have a desire to join in on the conversation, I highly encourage you to jump onto one of those platforms and hang out in the chat room. Between myself and my really amazing producers, Eric and Bill, we will grab your questions if you have those, as time allows us to do so. If you do have those questions, make sure you type them in all caps so we can see them easier. And we'll be able to get those questions answered. I have a feeling you're going to have some tonight. Tonight's going to be a really interesting journey story to hear. Speaking of my producers, though, huge shout out to them. I don't shout out to them often enough. These fellas work so hard for us, not just for me, but all of the other great shows here on the station. They are so amazing. So kudos to them. And of course, my listeners, Wanderers, you guys, you keep showing up every week and hanging out in these chat rooms and supporting the show and the station. Thank you. I am so appreciative and adore your interaction with each other and with me. Thank you so much. I want to get started right away. There's going to be so much to share tonight. So without further ado, let me introduce our guest tonight. It's Kris Newby, and she's an author and award-winning science writer at Stanford University and the senior producer of Lyme disease documentary Under Our Skin, which premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival and was a 2010 Oscar semifinalist. She has 2 degrees in engineering, a bachelor's degree from the University of Utah, and a master's degree from Stanford University. She uncovers the mystery surrounding one of the most controversial and misdiagnosed conditions of our time, which is Lyme disease, revealing the man behind a secret role in developing the bug-borne biological weapons and raising terrifying questions about the genesis of this epidemic of tick-borne diseases affecting millions of Americans today. Let's welcome to the show our guest, Kris Newby. Thank you for being here with us this evening.
Thank you, AJ. I've been looking forward to talking about this and my journey that got me into this very unusual position.
Yes, I would say I don't feel like someone just is like, I'm going to talk about Lyme disease as a passion. There's obviously some backstory there.
Yeah, I mean, I started out as an engineer. I had come from a family of engineers. My dad was in the Navy, and he was a Navy pilot, and then he went into satellite engineering, and he told me when I was young, you will be an engineer. But writing was my passion, so I ended up in the right place eventually, not necessarily thinking I would be writing about ticks and diseases. Mm-hmm. But anyways, I got an engineering degree from University of Utah, then another one from Stanford. And I started out designing phones at Bell Labs, then computers at Convergent Technologies. Then I did technical marketing at Apple Computer. And then I had 2 boys. And after I had the second boy, it's like, well, it's really hard to be part of an intense engineering team and I worked at home for a decade or so, doing technical writing and marketing consulting. So I wrote tech stuff, and I thought that's really how I'd spend the rest of my life, until my family went on a vacation, like Gilligan's Island, a 2-hour tour, and then everything changed. We went to Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts in 2002, then came back to California where we lived, and both my husband and I got really sick. Our kids dodged the bullet, and then we spent a year suffering from a really devastating mystery illness. It took a year, 10 doctors, and $60,000 to finally figure out what was wrong, which was really can be fatal tick-borne diseases, Lyme disease, and babesiosis. Babesia is a malaria-like parasite transmitted by tick bites. And that's sort of started this, which is now an 18-year journey, finding out why it took so long for the doctors, for me, and then, millions of other patients to diagnose this pretty straightforward disease, and then why there's so much controversy in how it's treated.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean you got sick after your vacation? Like, what were you experiencing that you knew, like, something's not right?
Well, within just a few days of flying back from Boston, we had classic flu symptoms, and they resemble COVID too. Muscle aches, intense fatigue, headaches, like your head's going to explode, chills and fever. But mostly it was just the sickest my husband and I had ever been. I mean, when we got back, about 4 days after we got back, we made an appointment together, and we said, we are really, really sick. Mm-hmm. We went to the first doctor. We were totally healthy, athletic, 42-year-olds. And we went in, the doctor said, we've never been this sick. Something's wrong. And they said, oh, it's just probably a virus. Go home and come back in a week if it's still there. It should resolve itself. We came back in just a couple of days and said, no, this is serious. We are super, super sick. Mm-hmm. And this doctor, who we didn't know very well since we're so healthy, called the chief of infectious disease at the clinic. And he said, well, Lyme disease, super rare. Because I suggest to every doctor I saw, all 10 doctors, I said, I think we could have Lyme disease, because I know Martha's Vineyard had a huge epidemic then and now. And the symptoms, the flu-like symptoms, that was classic Lyme disease. And they said, no, it's a really rare disease. No. And so then we went home again, got sicker and sicker. And it's like a really long and boring story. But our frontline doctor said, see the infectious disease specialist. I didn't know at the time that infectious disease doctors have a bias against Lyme disease. They don't believe it can be chronic. They think it's rare. So we went in to see this doctor together, and he spent maybe 10 minutes with us and said, I don't know what's wrong with you. It's not Lyme disease. I'm going to test you for tropical sprue, which I don't even know what that disease is. And I said, but we haven't been to the tropics. We've been to Massachusetts, and Lyme disease is a problem there. Tropical sprue is not a problem in Massachusetts. But he tested us anyways, parvovirus negative. And then I said, well, can we just take some antibiotics and see if that helps? So he gave us a short course of antibiotics over Christmas. It worked really well. But about a week after that, those antibiotics were done, our symptoms, this is January now, came crashing in on us, and I could no longer work anymore. We were having a lot of serious neurological issues, loss of sense of self, time and place, inability to read because you couldn't remember the last 2 words you read. So how could you process a sentence? Light and sound sensitivity. It was like you would go to some PTA event or a party, and you couldn't tell. There was no difference in the volume between the person next to you and the person across the room. So it was like a cacophony. Executive functioning was horrible. I remember taking my kids to school on a road that I had been down every day for 12 years, and I stopped at the traffic light, and I couldn't remember what red, green, and yellow meant. I had to sit there and say, well, what do those mean? When it's green, what do I do? Then I turned on a one-way street that was in my neighborhood, a mistake that a normal person wouldn't do. Or I would leave my car for an errand and leave the engine running. So just serious neurological issues. And we would I called the infectious disease doctor and I said, hey, that first dose of antibiotics, it was just simple doxycycline and another anti-parasite drug called itaquinol. And I said, that really worked for us. And once we stopped, it came back in a week or so. And he says, wow. I said, can we have more? And he says, no. He says, we as doctors can't treat based on reactions to drugs, so.
Oh, really?
So,
makes no sense.
I know, makes no sense. So, I was crying on the phone, please give us, it's not like antibiotics are addictive. They're not like opioids. I mean, nobody likes taking antibiotics, but you like taking them if it lets you function as an adult. So he finally gave me another dose, and we stopped it and it came back again, the same symptoms. And at that point, that infectious disease doctor, when I was begging for more antibiotics, he goes, I think what we have here is a psychosomatic couples thing where your husband is a successful Silicon Valley engineering director, and you're at home working now with your two kids, and you're just seeking attention. And it was just I was filled with such anger because we had serious issues with almost every organ of our body, our GI tract, our brains, our joints hurt. My husband, he's a handy Dan. He couldn't even pick up a Makita drill. It hurt so much. And he had trouble drawing. I had trouble filling out a check, and we had symptoms, the same symptoms pretty much that started on the same day. And we were 8 months into it. It was horrible. And I said, I'm quitting this doctor. I can't be with a doctor who thinks I'm a hysterical female manifesting symptoms in my whole body.
It's amazing to me. I've gone through doctors myself for other experiences that I've had. The lack of care and concern, and that the way that they'll find any other reason other than it not being the reason just blows my mind. I know that's not all doctors across the board. So in your case, did you ever find a doctor who genuinely cared about what you were going through and was able to assist the two of you?
Well, eventually, the next step was we were next to a large academic medical center with a famous infectious disease group. So I tried to get in there. And what I didn't realize at the time is there's two tiers of doctors. There's the sort of HMO, general community clinic doctor, infectious disease doctor. But once you get to an academic medical center, they're the best of the best, elite. They have long waiting lists. It's almost like they have to decide they want to take on your case. And it took probably a month and a half to pull every connection string I could to get into this infectious disease department. So 2 infectious disease doctors, a senior one and a younger one, listened to our case. And at least they took our symptoms seriously, and they tested us for, I think, about 15 or 20 diseases, including AIDS and syphilis. And I said, we do not have a sexually transmitted disease. But they did that. But finally, the doctor says, well, these symptoms could be Lyme disease. And he tested us both for Lyme disease. And sure enough, my test came back really positive. My husband's didn't. And at that point, they tried to hide those results from us, which was weird. They read the results of every other test, but they tried to hide the Lyme disease. And I didn't really understand it at the time, but I went home and then I read that the Lyme disease test is a 2-step process. There's a screening test, which isn't as sensitive, and then they followed up with this thing called the Western blot, which is more sensitive. So I called them up and said, hey, I did have a very positive first test. Can I have the second one? And they acted like it was a mistake. Oh, we didn't know that, or they should have done it automatically. And so they ordered the second one, and I came up positive again. And then they called me in to read those results, and they said, well, we don't have the tools to treat someone like you. You're fired as a patient. So they said, for both of you to get Lyme disease would be like winning the lottery. Which to
Except
me was,
for what do you win?
who wants to win this lottery?
Exactly.
No one. No one wants to belong to this club. And that was probably the low point of this experience, being so sick with my husband for a year. And we have 2 middle school kids that depend on us, and I can no longer work. My husband would just go to work and fake it because we needed the health insurance to figure out what was wrong with us. He would be at a whiteboard giving a presentation to very important people at his company, and he would freeze because he couldn't remember what he was saying, where he was, or who he was. And he just turned around and looked at them with a blank stare and left, because what else can you do?
Yeah.
So embarrassing.
So talk to me a little bit about Lyme disease. Like, what are the symptoms and how does it affect you? Obviously, it's affecting you neurologically. Is that the biggest side effect or symptom of Lyme disease, or what are they?
It is fundamentally a neurological disease. So Lyme disease is transmitted by the bite of ticks. The tick bites you for a blood meal, and then when it bites you, its saliva numbs your skin so you don't feel it biting you, and it releases chemicals into your body that dampens your immune system for about a week. Then as its back end sort of bellows in and out, it sucks in blood, and then whatever's in its stomach goes into your body. And ticks can carry, 20 sort of dangerous germs, viruses and bacteria, parasites. And it's a lottery. It is a lottery on what you get when they bite you, if they are infected or if they're not infected. So Lyme disease itself is a little bacterium. It's a spiral-shaped bacteria. It looks like a little corkscrew. Once it launches into your bloodstream, it hitches a ride on red blood cells, and it tries to find tissues, and then it burrows into your tissue just like a corkscrew into a cork. It tries to find places outside of the bloodstream where your immune system can't get to it. So that might be in your knee joint where you have scar tissue from that wrestling or that bike accident, or in your brain, because your brain is protected against your immune system. Because if your brain swells, you go into a coma and die. So the other disease we had was babesiosis, which was a cattle parasite and crossed over to man in the late 60s. And my book goes into what happened in the late 60s with a bunch of tick-borne diseases. And so anyways, Lyme disease is a neurological disease. It grows very slowly, but it's as it lives in consumes your nutrients in your body, it releases chemicals that are very inflammatory in your body. So just a few numbers of them can create inflammation in all the systems of your body and wreak havoc.
It sounds awful, just absolutely awful. I just think about, well, okay, so I have MS, and it's also a neurological autoimmune disease. Very different in the way that it forms, but I can relate to the neurological part. You were talking about your husband writing on a whiteboard and just absolutely going blank and not understanding what was even coming next. That's something I experience often. And some of the other symptoms. However, this one feels very terrifying to me. Like, I feel like there's definitely more research and more backup when it comes to other neurological diseases. This one is so unknown, and the source from which it comes is so unknown, or it's known and not talked about, which we'll get to. It's scary, and I'm sorry that is your experience, but I'm thankful that you are bringing awareness to all of us to understand what exactly this disease is and does to someone, and your journey story with us, so we're aware, so we can also do the homework and take the precautions needed when necessary.
Yeah. Well, I would say that the symptoms of Lyme disease are very similar to MS, and there's certainly been misdiagnoses. I mean, multiple sclerosis, MS is just a list of symptoms, and the symptoms of having Lyme disease, it's called Borrelia burgdorferi. The family of bacteria that it comes from, Borrelia, they're all relapsing fevers. So all Borrelias, and they cause various diseases, have the ability to go dormant in your body. They form these little sort of protective cysts that can't be reached by antibiotics. And when your immune system is compromised, or maybe you're pregnant, or you're in a car accident, or you have surgery, they blossom again. And then whereas your immune system is keeping it in control, when they blossom and start metabolizing, they release their inflammatory chemicals and you get sick again. So anyways, that was a low point when, like, the best and the brightest infectious diseases doctors were essentially saying, you tested positive for disease. Yeah, you have real disease symptoms, but we can't treat you here. And later I find out it's for political reasons. So I went to the Dr. Google, the internet, and because the Lyme disease community has been marginalized by mainstream medicine, they're very organized and they're very helpful, in finding a doctor. The best site right now is lymedisease.org to find a doctor. So I found one in my neighborhood, and as soon as we got under her care, she was good at telling what infections we had and treating us slowly at first because we had such a high germ load and we were so sick, and then slowly bringing us back to health. And that was fantastic. And while I was coming back to health, during that recovery phase, which takes a while when you're that sick, I did a documentary called Under Our Skin with a really talented film director, Andy Abrahams Wilson, in Marin. And so that was my passion project, I guess, in my therapy too, because in looking for answers for my husband and I really got to interview Lyme patients and experts all over the country. I learned so much about the disease, and I also learned that this is a really horrible epidemic nationwide. Cases have been found in all states, or reported in all states now. There are CDC's Centers for Disease Control's latest numbers are that there are 476,000 cases a year, new cases a year. This is based on insurance data. And I think everyone here remembers when we hit the 500,000 mark with COVID, it was like, oh my gosh, that's a lot. But this is Lyme disease per year, almost 500,000. And
that's an insane amount.
It is. It is. It's like, I think 1,300 a day if you average it out. That's a lot.
It is. And so why isn't it being talked about, and why is the research not happening and being put on the down low? Like, that's what I want to know. If it is this big, and we'll get to COVID because, of course, I'm going to ask you about COVID. I mean, I'm sure everyone is at this point, right?
Yeah.
However, COVID, I'm not disregarding it as being, it's bad. It's obviously, but there are things that are a lot worse. And yet those are swept under the rug and not discussed, like Lyme disease. It just blows my mind. It makes me want to ask more questions. And honestly, Kris, before you came into my awareness, I had just made an assumption that Lyme disease was another autoimmune disease of some kind. I read the symptoms. I'm like, wow, that sounds very familiar. I know a couple of people who've been diagnosed with Lyme disease. I understood it to be horrible because of their experiences that I've been shared. But until you came into my awareness, I never for 1 second imagined it to be what it is, which you talk about in your book and which we'll learn more about here after this break. So when we get back, we're going to go in deeper into this disease and the awareness thereof. So I hope you all stay close. We're just getting started. We'll be right back.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Are you still at it?
Yeah, I need more speed.
This baby's fast.
My dad's fast. He's scary fast.
You really think you could beat him?
Yeah, because I drink more tea than he does.
Yeah, right.
You know, pal, it's the tea that makes you go. Oh. Hey, Dad.
You know, kiddo, you have to drink a lot more tea to be faster than me.
Drink the tea that makes you go. Life Change Tea. You may not need as much as Dad. You never know. GetTheTea.com. Log on to GetTheTea.com.
Welcome to the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. Here you'll find great new content, including the KGRA Classics, great shows from our archives. You'll be able to see the show times and information so you can see what show is currently on air. The on-air live button, so just go to this section and you'll be able to hear the show live with exceptional sound quality. We also have the Vault section. Make sure to subscribe to get access to great content and special features. We have the make content for our latest news and events, so make sure to sign up and you can be part of our forum. So make sure to check out the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. We look forward to seeing you there, and we hope that you enjoy the new website.
Mainstream media's most wanted. KGRAradio.com.
Hello, all. Welcome back. You are listening to Soul Wanderings on KGRAradio.com. Actually, that's the old address. Habits, they sometimes don't die down. It's KGRADB.com. How about that? Our guest tonight is Kris Newby. She's the author of Bitten, The Secret History of Lyme Disease and Biological Weapons. And welcome back, Kris.
Thanks.
Speaking of biological weapons, I would really like to head that direction. Do you feel that Lyme disease is a biological weapon?
I think they experimented with it in the early 50s, but they found out it was too hard to weaponize in that it's very slow growing, so you can't mass produce it. And it can't grow outside of living cells very easily. But they tried to weaponize it in the beginning, and then they moved on to other tick-borne diseases that were easier to weaponize. So one of them is a rickettsia, which is a tiny little bacteria. It's so small, they thought it was a virus for a long time. But the most deadly of the rickettsias is Rocky Mountain spotted fever. And they started trying to weaponize that as a lethal weapon. And the advantages to Rocky Mountain spotted fever as a weapon is that they could grow those bacteria in a medium. They could mass produce it. And then they could freeze dry the organisms, and they went into sort of a dormant phase, and then they could spray them over enemies. And they experimented with various ways to deploy those in aerosol form. So from airplane sprayers like crop dusters on blowers on the back of trucks. They tried experiments. The deployment, they did experiments in the New York subway with what they thought were harmless simulants of these bacteria. It did end up making people sick. But that was just what they did then in the Cold War. So my belief on the Lyme disease outbreak, and it's based on eyewitness reports from Willy Burgdorfer, who discovered Lyme disease. He told me at a certain point that he believes that the thing that was really making people sick was not just Lyme disease, but Lyme disease with the Willy Burgdorfer eye, with one of these spotted fever-like bacterium. And he was told when he discovered the spirochetes to not mention that other organism. So a cover-up of sorts. So in a way, the Lyme disease spirochete was used as a deflection from, this other bacterium. And so I base this on his confession of sorts. I got a hold of his original lab notebooks that he squirreled away in his garage. And then I got to confirm these with documents from the government, from various places, the military. And, what I would like people to know is that the biological weapons program, which started at the end of World War II, went through the 50s and 60s. The biological weapons program was canceled in 1972 by Nixon and Kissinger. But this program, which used live organisms as a weapon, it was almost as big as the Manhattan Project for nuclear weapons. And those two organizations were competing for Pentagon funding. So it became almost a nuclear arms race. And the biological weapons program, in my opinion and others, was just completely out of control with the number of experiments, field tests on unsuspecting Americans. And a lot of what my book does is, I go through my experience with Lyme disease and why I care and why I think this is really a serious thing that we need to deal with. I went into Willy Burgdorfer's life. He was a Swiss-German scientist who came over here in 51, 52 and began in the biological weapons program from the very beginning. He started by putting plague and fleas. He started stuffing ticks with some of the most deadly germs we know of. He would take these ticks, put pipettes in their mouths. In this experiment you see here, he was stuffing hard-shelled ticks with Venezuelan equine encephalitis virus, leptospirosis, which is another spirochete, somewhat related to Lyme disease, rabies, tularemia, which is super deadly tick-borne disease. It's also called rabbit fever. And that was one of their go-to biological weapons because it was so deadly. Venezuelan encephalitis, it was more of an incapacitating agent. So the biological weapons program had two arms. They wanted germs that were super deadly, kill the enemy, and then they wanted incapacitating germs, and it would be part of a multifaceted attack on the enemies. They would make people chronically ill, and instead of taking up the efforts of like one undertaker, it was a stealth weapon because you couldn't tell where it came from. You just knew that a lot of people got sick, and it just seemed like a bad flu season. And it would take up, it would slow down the factories, the ways for the country to make money, it'd harm their economic engines. And it would take up caretakers. It would tie up the hospitals and clinics. It's just very evil.
Understatement. I'm just blown away by what you are sharing. Why would they do this other than the things that you just said, like, changing the economics and slowing down healthcare? What is the purpose of them infecting Americans like this?
Well, you have to realize the communist scare was really serious, and within the government, the ends justified the means. Whatever they had to do to defeat the commies was A-okay with them. And the one story that I found that really started the book and started me thinking, well, maybe these rumors of the Lyme disease outbreak being related to biological weapons in some way. The the tipping point for me was I was at a party with a bunch of strangers, and I was sitting at a kitchen table with about 5 people, and there was an old dude there who was really, he had a lot of angst. And I asked him what he did for a living, and he said, well, his wife had just left him. He was upset. He said, well, I used to work for the company. That's the CIA's dark arts arm. They did the assassinations. They did the really bad stuff in Vietnam against the Viet Cong in Cambodia. And he said, he went through a litany of some of the really bad things he did, which basically he's an assassin. And at the very end of his initial spiel, he says, but the craziest thing I ever did was I dropped boxes of ticks on Cuban sugar workers.
Oh,
and my husband and I were both there, and this guy didn't know me from anyone. And he didn't know that I just spent 5 years working on a Lyme disease documentary. And I just couldn't believe it. So then, without revealing why I cared, I asked him more and more. And he says, well, it was total economic warfare against the Cubans. Fidel Castro had ousted the semi-democratic government there, and Castro was canoodling with Khrushchev in Russia, and they were just afraid. And so it was just like anything they could do to oust Fidel. And in one of the ideas, and it was in part of this Operation Mongoose, was to harm the Cuban economy by wiping out their number one cash crop, which is sugarcane. So they had anti-crop things they sprayed, and they tried to harm the sugarcane workers, these poor people who work in the fields, and like one of the worst jobs in the world, which is working in a sugarcane field. They dropped these ticks. Now, I had this one eyewitness account of that, which isn't enough to write about, and I worked on the book for about 4 years before the Kennedy assassination files came out, because Kennedy was president then. Mm-hmm. And there was documentation talking about this Operation Mongoose and sub-project 33B, which was, let's do a small pilot study with bugs. They said insects in the document, but ticks aren't insects, and put diseases in them and see if we can, harm the sugar crop. So
I'm blown away. I am so blown away right now, Kris.
The point is, that was one of many pilot studies releasing insects with diseases in uncontrolled processes. That was the first that I think, the big find in the book is that that's the first evidence we have that they actually use these insects on foreign soil. There are lots of rumors that they were used in Korea, in Vietnam, and other historians are researching that. But this was the first use of ticks as a weapon. And then I'm not really sure what was in the ticks, but mm-hmm. The other interesting thing is I interviewed this guy over and over to make sure he was real, is he said when he came back from that mission, he brought back some germ and gave it to his new baby boy. And his new baby boy almost died in the hospital. He went into a coma with encephalitis. And you can't prove this, of course, but he believes that whatever he dropped on the Cubans, it bit him back.
With.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Well, wow, karma. That's just awful. It's absolutely awful to think that something is so small and almost out of our awareness could cause so much damage, even death. And we are so unsuspecting as humans, thinking that nothing like that could possibly happen. And we're not protecting ourselves. We aren't educated about it. And it's happening. Ticks. Why would they weaponize ticks of all things, right?
Fleas and mosquitoes too, because it's the perfect stealth.
I was going to ask about that.
Perfect stealth weapon. Mm-hmm. It's hard to trace. You can't find fingerprints on the backs of ticks. And as we know with Lyme disease, it's just really hard to diagnose. Mm-hmm. We don't even though it's been since 1982 where they discovered Lyme disease, we don't have a test that screens for it in the first month that's reliable. the test they have now is an antibody test. And all that measures is your body's response to exposure to that germ. You might not be actively infected, or maybe you got so many germs in that tick bite that your body it doesn't even create antibodies anymore. They're all tied up in these antibody complexes that don't show up on the test. So it's very frustrating to me that so little progress has been made. And so, I'm an engineer by training and a science writer who's just asking questions. And you brought it up earlier. It's like, why? Every other disease, the scientists and researchers involved in it say, oh, my disease is bad. You need to research it and give me more money. And Lyme disease, there's a small group of people that control the research funds, and they say, oh, Lyme disease is no big deal. It's easy to diagnose, treat, and cure. Go away. And so, part of that story is that original crew that worked on the researching Lyme disease ended up getting patents on test kits and being financially entangled in the vaccine trial, and the vaccine was eventually pulled from the market. So there's a little bit of a profit motive there. Mm-hmm. There's a little bit of pride because in rushing to get that vaccine to market, I think they rushed the science, and the basic science may be a little flawed, and now they don't want to admit they're wrong. Mm-hmm. But part of it is what Willie said. Willie Brinkdorfer, the discoverer of Lyme disease, he said that they asked him to hide some of the other organisms that were inside those ticks that were making people in Lyme, Connecticut and Long Island really, really sick. And on my website, krisnewby.com, I have pictures of Willie's original Science magazine discovery article where he mentioned this other spotted fever-like organism that was in all the Lyme patients' blood that he tested, but he was asked to cover it up. He was asked to go take pictures, take slides of ticks that didn't have this organism in it to use in this magazine article. So I believe that one of the motivations behind this cover-up is that the military and the CDC didn't want to call attention to these experiments because they probably weren't sure which one of their many open air tests caused it, but they could look under the microscope and say, oh, this is just like the thing we weaponized in the 60s.
But the thing that gets me is what you said earlier. It continues on. When you went to the doctor and they just wanted to sweep it under the rug, what makes a doctor, are they afraid? Are they afraid to diagnose this disease? Are they afraid to find a cure for this disease or whatever that looks like? Because if it's not talked about and the doctors want to even sweep it under the rug and say that it's not happening, there's something bigger going on. And it doesn't just happen through the source. I mean, other people are being affected to the point, are they scared? Like, what's going on?
Well, it's a complicated equation. And that's why it's taken so long to really understand the dynamics. And first of all, I'll say that I think most doctors are fundamentally good people, and they really, really want to get their patients better. Mm-hmm. I work, at Stanford Medical School. I don't work there anymore, and that's what I truly believe. But what happened with this first crew of researchers is that they had to get this vaccine trial up and running, and they believed that the vaccine would help a lot of people from getting this horrible disease. They probably didn't know about the Willie cover-up. I'm sure they didn't know about it. And I think they rushed the science, and they developed a test that isn't that effective, and they ignored a lot of the symptoms of chronic disease. Because how can you run a vaccine trial? How can you release a vaccine if a disease is chronic and it hides out in your body for a couple of years and it comes back? And, it's so I think that's part of it. It's not the fundamental science is wrong. And these people who are in the original discovery are from prestigious universities. Mm-hmm. And so the rest of the physicians in the US said, well, these guys are at the epicenter. They know what they're doing. I'm going to trust the people from Harvard and Yale instead of these whiny patients, so it's just a credibility thing.
Yeah.
Another part of it is, the fundamental science, I believe, was shortcutted. And, Willy Bergdorfer, who was our number one tick researcher in the U.S. before he died, he said, we need to start the Lyme disease research from ground zero. He said this on camera in the documentary. And we need to give the research dollars to people who don't know the results before they start the experiments. So to me, that says that there was political pressure not to discover chronic Lyme, or not to admit that there's chronic Lyme.
Yeah.
And certainly in that interview, that was a 2007 interview in Montana with Willie, he said, oh yeah, the government knows that Lyme disease can go on to be chronic, and it affects the developing neurological systems of children more than adults, and they're just not talking about it. So, why you can't look into the hearts of every scientist and physician, but I believe that most doctors don't know that the fundamental research is bad and that some people are lying. And even Willy Bergdorfer said the CDC knew that the markers that they were using for that original test were flawed, but they started with a lie and they didn't want to reverse it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's actual evidence, there's actual proof that Lyme disease was created as a biological weapon. Do you believe
not
that?
Lyme disease. I'm saying there were other organisms that were weaponized. They worked on Lyme disease, but it was never on the go-to list. So I went to the University of Maryland Archive on Biological Weapons. And so the headquarters of biological weapons, there's a big org chart that's really good on my website that shows Fort Detrick was the brains of the outfit. And then they compartmentalized all their little experiments with all branches of the military and with 50 or so major universities. And they would give little pieces of these projects to create biological weapons to all these people. The Navy was spraying aerosolized germs. Air Force did a little. The Army sort of ran Camp Detrick. There was also a branch of CIA at Camp Detrick that would call on Willie or the people in the biological weapons program if they needed a special project. They called it Special Operations Division, where they needed to assassinate someone or maybe a chemical from tick paralysis they could throw in a dart and paralyze a German Shepherd guard in Europe. So yeah, it was just a vast program. And what Willie said, when I tried to probe, he would not give me details. I don't know if he didn't know all the details or if he just was afraid of the secrecy oath. He said he was told he would be deported if he talked. And he said, accidents happen. He says, and he told that to me and other people. So it was like he was a reluctant whistleblower, I would say. And when I interviewed him, he had advanced Parkinson's. So that's why I took 5 years to write the book and try to get as much evidence as I could, and then present the evidence to people. I mean, there's the history of the biological weapons, so you can sort of fit it into context. And then I say very clearly what we knew, what we didn't know. This is what I think happened around that area, which are aerosolized tests that went wrong. And this is a steel sphere, a 1 liter steel sphere at Camp Detrick, Fort Detrick, Maryland. And in this, they would test aerosolized germs on animals and soldiers.
Oh my God.
They mostly Seventh-day Adventists. They gave them a choice. Okay, you can go to the front lines of Vietnam, or you can test our vaccines. And the conscientious objectors who didn't want to participate in violence said, yeah, we'll help the medical effort. And so they would sit in that sphere and they would spray germs on vaccinated and unvaccinated soldiers. And then physicians would track the course of their disease. My friend from Detrick wanted me to add, no one ever died from these experiments, but
the actual effects of it, what's actually worse.
And were there chronic conditions that these volunteers suffered from later on? Exactly. I don't think anyone's ever dared fund that kind of research.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they'd be afraid. For those of you who are wondering what she's talking about, if you are just listening on KGRA-DB or any other platform, audio only, be sure to go over to KGRA Facebook page, YouTube page. You can see the actual photos that she's referring to. She shares this experience with us. When you were writing your book, Kris, what were you most surprised about after finding all of this information?
Well, the size of the program, I would say, as relates to the outbreak around Lyme, Connecticut,
Mm-hmm.
A factor in that outbreak of 3 really bad tick-borne diseases that happened late 60s is that one university near Norfolk, Virginia, did a series of tick experiments where this is when the government was still thinking they could drop infected ticks on the enemy. And they wanted to know, okay, if we drop boxes of ticks on the enemy, how far will the ticks travel, either by crawling or on the backs of birds per day, per month, per year? So they could tell, how far the diseases were spreading. So this enterprising, creative professor, he was young, ambitious. He needed some research money to launch his lab. So he got funding from the Army and the Atomic Energy Commission. And so why the Atomic Energy Commission? Because he took these ticks and made them radioactive. So he injected them with radioactive fluid. These are pregnant's the wrong word, but you'd go to, this is the Rocky Mountain Lab tick library where they kept ticks from all around the world, reference ticks. And the tinker would say, hey, we need a tick. Hey, Willie, or the people there, we need a tick that will survive Siberian winters or Moscow winters. What's a hardy tick? And so at that time, Willie sent this professor in Virginia the Lone Star tick. And before these experiments that he did happened, Lone Star ticks, it's a white star on their back. That's why it's called a Lone Star tick. But mostly they were in the far south, Texas, Florida, way below the Mason-Dixon line. But they were super hardy. This professor did experiments and they could live underwater for 70 days and come out alive. Or Willie said these ticks, you could put them in a freezer for a year and some of them could come back to life. Super.
That's insane.
Hardy. I know. So anyways, this professor, he took a bunch of these pregnant Lone Star ticks, and by bunch, I mean hundreds of thousands of them. And he would inject them with the radioactive fluid. The females would have their eggs, 2,000 to 3,000. And then the nymphs, the larva ticks that would hatch would be radioactive for life. Now, why would you make them radioactive? Because he could use a Geiger counter to see how far they creeped or flew over months to years.
Oh my hell. This is so much.
I know. These were uninfected ticks, but they thought they were uninfected ticks, lab-grown ticks. But once you make them radioactive and they mix with germs in the wild, like what happens to the germs exposed to radioactive activity? We all know that it causes an acceleration of mutations. So anyways, this happens late 60s, and 2 years later, there's an outbreak of these ticks in the north for the first time on Montauk, Long Island. And, to me, it seems logical that birds over these 4 years he did these experiments carried these non-native ticks to Long Island. They started killing the native deer tick. And sure enough, around the early 70s, there were just many deaths. Mid-70s, there were deaths from spotted fever because these ticks carry spotted fever. The native deer ticks didn't carry spotted fever. So to me, I say this at the end of my book, please, entomologists, study this to see, is this the cause of this spread of Rocky Mountain spotted fever? And then the other thing that these Lone Star ticks cause is alpha-gal red meat allergy. Do you know about that?
I have never heard of that before.
It's turning out to be a really bad problem, but these Lone Star ticks, they bite you and something in their saliva creates an allergy that can last forever in some people to red meat allergy. it's not like a bee sting where you get bitten and immediately it puffs up and you have to go to the ER for anaphylactic shock. This red meat allergy has a delayed reaction.
How delayed? And what are you talking?
Like 5 or 6 hours. 5 or 6 hours. So in the middle of the night, all of a sudden you might start vomiting, or feeling nauseous, vomiting. You can't have anaphylaxis.
And how would you even know that's what it was? I mean, who would just automatically know that?
It's been a slow building of knowledge and publicizing it. I interviewed one. I'm writing an article about alpha-gal allergy now, and I interviewed one patient in Tennessee, and he said, "Oh yeah, I had arthritis, or I went to an allergist because of this nausea." He went on a bro trip to see the NFL draft picks, and of course they had a lot of beers and hamburgers, and he got really, really sick on that trip. And then he went to his allergist, and his allergist says, "Oh yeah, I'm getting about 2 or 3 of those alpha-gal red meat allergy patients a week now." So it's growing awareness, and hopefully my articles will help people who don't know what's wrong.
Yeah. I mean, the awareness is huge, right? I've talking about it, sharing it on programs like this, your book, having those conversations. It's so important that you continue to do this work. Obviously, you had this experience, unfortunately, but fortunately, so you could bring more awareness to what is really, truly going on here. We are going to take our last break of the show, and then we'll have a full hour to continue our wandering. So I hope you all stay close. We are going to be talking about so much more. We'll be right back.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Are you still at it?
Yeah, I need more speed.
This baby's fast.
My dad's fast. He's scary fast.
You really think you could beat him?
Yeah, because I drink more tea than he does.
Yeah, right.
You know, pal, it's the tea that makes you go.
Oh.
Hey, Dad.
You know, kiddo, you have to drink a lot more tea to be faster than me.
Drink the tea that makes you go. Life Change Tea. You may not need as much as Dad. You never know. GetTheTea.com. Log on to GetTheTea.com.
Welcome to the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. Here you'll find great new content, including the KGRA Classics, great shows from our archives. You'll be able to see the show times and information so you can see what show is currently on air. The on-air live button. So just go to this section and you'll be able to hear the show live with exceptional sound quality. We also have the Vault section. Make sure to subscribe to get access to great content and special features. We have the make content for our latest news and events, so make sure to sign up and you can be part of our forum. So make sure to check out the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. We look forward to seeing you there, and we hope that you enjoy the new website.
Mainstream media's most wanted. KGRAradio.com.
Welcome back. You are listening to Soul Wanderings on KGRA Digital Broadcasting, Salt Lake City, Utah, Hudson Valley, New York, And have you guys checked out the new KGRA website? I highly recommend you do. KGRADB.com. I had a gander in the back end, the exclusive area, where you can also be a member yourself. You guys, there is so much going on there, and they're adding more every week. So go over there. Go check out KGRADB, the exclusive content, the KGRA classics. See for yourself. It's really awesome. It's a great website. Great job. The whole team has just been doing a spectacular job. Tonight, we are visiting with Kris Newby. She's the author of Bitten, The Secret History of Lyme Disease and Biological Weapons. This stuff is very unsettling, to say the least. Kris, I am so glad that you are bringing awareness to all of us and sharing your experience and the history of what is and has been going on. It's just, over break, I kind of like am unsettled. I'm not even going to lie. It doesn't feel good. There's a lot of things going on right now, as we all know. We brought up COVID earlier, and of course, I've always wondered what the truth was behind that. Me, like thousands of other people as well. The same. I had no idea this was even a thing, and that this is how Lyme disease came about. It's just, I don't want to create fear or create that energy, but the awareness is nice to have. It's definitely unsettling just to think, how often I'm outdoors and in the wilderness or wherever it may be. But you could be anywhere at this point, right? Because these little critters, they travel. they travel on birds and animals, and it's just, how do we protect ourselves? Are we ever really safe from getting infected?
Well, I still hike. It's just awareness.
Yeah.
Tick checks after you've been on a hike in a tick-infested region. Don't save your clothes and wear them for tomorrow. Put them in the washing machine in the dryer, so you make sure if any of the little tiny ticks, and some of them can be the size of poppy seeds, just make sure they're good and dead.
How do you know, if you're checking, is there a bump? Is there a bite? What does it look like? What does it feel like?
Well, you can't feel them because ticks have been around for 100 million years, and they're just really good at getting a blood meal without you knowing it. Mm-hmm. But the places that they like are damp and protected. So that would be underneath your hairline, behind your ears, in your belly button, your armpits, in your crotch. So just do a thorough tick check. Now, there are many products that you can spray on your body when you're out in the woods. There's toxic ones and not so toxic ones. And if you go online, you can see the range of them. Mm-hmm. Then you can buy clothes that have those chemicals, those irritants, or not irritants, but they deter ticks from wanting to crawl up your legs. Then the other thing I would say is if you pull out an embedded tick, take it really seriously, especially if it's full of blood, because that means whatever was in the tick's gut is in your body now. And go to your doctor, and if it's engorged, well, first of all, save the tick, put it in a little plastic baggie with a piece of damp paper towel, and then send it in to get the tick tested, because that's actually faster than waiting to see if you get symptoms. And if you get it tick tested, you can find out if it has multiple germs, not just Lyme disease. Mm-hmm. And there are, if you're in Pennsylvania, PALyme.org tests your ticks for free. If you're out of state, PA Lyme tests it for just a nominal amount. It's fast and quick, and at least you know what you're fighting if you come down with symptoms later. Mm-hmm. If you are bitten and you know it or don't know it, and you get a classic Lyme disease rash, what that is it's a rash that usually a week to 3 weeks after you're bitten, it's a rash that's red and it grows over time. Mm-hmm. It's not just like an allergic irritation rash. It grows, and sometimes there's a central clearing. They call that a bullseye rash, but sometimes it doesn't have a central clearing. And Also, if you have brown skin, it may be hard to see it. It may be more black than red. Mm-hmm. Then if you pulled out a tick and you get flu-like symptoms, especially in the summer, take that seriously and go to your doctor and say, hey, let's not wait for over a month to see if the tests are positive. Let's just have a small, safe dose of doxycycline so we can, nip this problem in the bud. But I believe that, well, when people get Lyme disease and are treated with just the standard course of antibiotics, 10 to 20% of them go on to get chronic symptoms, and you might need more courses of antibiotics later or to test for other tick-borne co-infections.
So this disease is something that could be treatable, or is it something you'll have long-lasting lifetime effects?
All the experts agree that if you treat Lyme disease early, it's completely you'll be able to cure it. No problem. What happens is if in the beginning you undertreat it, like there's some doctors who say, 2 pills of doxycycline will cure it. And even some scientists at the CDC say, no, that doesn't work. The people in the field, the patients say absolutely not, especially if you have co-infections. That's just not going to do it. So it's if you think you might have chronic Lyme disease, the next advice is to find someone who has a lot of experience treating those messy, complicated, hard to treat diseases. Mm-hmm. And LymeDisease.org has a nice little database where you can find a doctor who's experienced. Just like if you had a rare brain tumor, you would look for the doctor in the United States who had cured the most number of people. That's how I feel about Lyme doctors.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So, moving on from this awareness of Lyme disease into biological weapons, talk to us a little more about that. This obviously tried to go down that route, but there are others that have succeeded. What are those, and what does that look like for us?
You mean other people who've deployed biological weapons, or are you talking about COVID?
In general, COVID. Well, we can talk about COVID because that's in our awareness right here and right now. Do you believe that COVID was created as a biological weapon yourself?
I think, to me, this is my opinion, that it wasn't a purposeful release because it could have been so much worse. Mm-hmm. What I believe, and a lot of people in the U.S. government believe, is that the Wuhan lab in China was experimenting with bat viruses. That's known. The Wuhan laboratory had a history of biological accidents. Viruses are notoriously hard to contain, and you can see how maybe they were working on creating a coronavirus that they could use for a peaceful purpose, like delivering a flu vaccine through the nose. So they bred those viruses to latch onto the nose really well. So you can see how there could have been an accident when the lab workers was exposed, went shopping, and then the spread happened. And that's what the ex-CDC director thinks. He went public a couple of weeks ago. And when I was researching the book, the central question before I even started writing the book is, could this Lyme outbreak have been caused by a biological weapon? So I talked to experts who'd written scientific papers on it, and they talked about the signs that something is, if an outbreak is natural or unnatural. And there are a lot of parallels between the COVID outbreak and Lyme disease. First of all, it's a point source outbreak. We saw that in Lyme and Wuhan. Lyme, it was, the outbreak was in Lyme and one other place around northern Wisconsin. Second of all, it's an unusual number of symptoms not seen before. And with COVID, we have the crazy loss of taste and smell. That is just weird. And even the experts say there are not many diseases that do that. With Lyme disease, there was the poofy knee joints, Lyme arthritis is what they called it in the beginning. That was unusual. They had the spotted fever on Long Island that killed people because spotted fever only had a couple cases over the previous decade. And all of a sudden there was 127 people really sick. It was unusual. And then the crazy babesiosis parasite, it was formerly in cattle and all of a sudden it was in people. So unusual outbreak. This is an interesting note I found in Willie's lab notebooks during the outbreak. He said when he was testing the blood and the ticks around the Lyme disease region, he observed not just the Lyme spirochetes, which is what sort of the science article says, but Wolbachia, which is a kind of rickettsia bacteria, east side agent, another rickettsia, and babesia in the ticks, and microfilaria, which are these. It was a highly unusual large worm inside the ticks around that area. So the point was there was multiple pathogens, and when experts are looking at unnatural and natural outbreaks, they say typically an unnatural outbreak involves multiple pathogens. And that's what we saw. But, Willie covered it up. And that means that avenue that researchers could have explored was hidden. And that could be why we don't, people go 10 to 20% of the people who are treated for Lyme disease go on to be chronically ill. Is it one of these rickettsias? Is it a combination of these germs? We just don't know because the researchers didn't know. There was doubt in the discoverer's mind.
That's a high percentage, 20%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I usually can talk a lot, Kris, and I really am at a loss for words.
I hope I'm not talking too much.
No, I enjoy it. I'm just blown away by your research and what you have discovered through your investigating in writing your book and in your documentary. There's so much information and so many things are happening all around us. And we as humans are so good at like, we just are so naive to what's really going on in the world until, of course, it happens to us. And so just hearing about it from you is just, it's new to me. And so I'm trying to wrap my head around it all. It's a lot of information. It's, I don't want to be scared, but it is scary. It's unsettling. And it blows my mind. First of all, before we go on, you brought up your documentary earlier. I want to make sure we can get our eyes on that. Where is that located? How can we see that?
You can watch it for free if you're an Amazon Prime member.
Okay.
Or you can go to the director's website. You can just do, I think it's underourskin.com, or go to Open Eye Pictures. That's Andy's company that did that film, which was an amazing experience. And
I can imagine. Yeah. So the documentary is called Under Our Skin. If you guys missed that at the beginning of the show, go and watch it. Obviously, it's incredible with all of this, awards that it's received. Keep going. I want to know it all. I want to be a sponge and hear.
So I think one of the things that attracted me to the story is whatever happened 50 years ago is still a problem now.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The biological weapons experiments that were done, there was a bunch in central Utah at Dugway Proving Grounds.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you about that, actually.
Yeah. But so, thousands. Like I printed out a stack of paper like that big
mm-hmm.
of the open air experiments. And most of them, you can't read the details of exactly where they're released because it's all classified. That was frustrating. But the point is, it's like an American Chernobyl, where Chernobyl was the nuclear accident in Russia.
Mm-hmm.
It's lasting effects. It's spreading. The outbreak was a point source in the 60s in Lyme, Connecticut. Now it's spreading south, to the Midwest, up to Canada, because of birds and mammal migration and people bringing their dogs. It's just spreading all over. So it's the American Chernobyl. And where this epidemic could have been contained in the 70s if we had known the whole truth, it was minimized. And Now it's going to take a huge effort to control it. But I believe there are millions of people with this chronic Lyme, and we need to work on treatments. Okay, so another thing I'm working on is analyzing the National Institutes of Health research funding for Lyme disease in the last 5 years. And I read the research proposals for 335 grants. And the thing that just blew me away, and I thought I knew a lot about Lyme disease, is out of those 335 grants, only 4 deal with treatment studies to treat the people who are sick right now. Most of the research is for basic research. So you're just looking under a microscope. 4.
That's
so
it.
Millions of sick people.
Mm-hmm.
And these people are told that chronic Lyme doesn't exist because their test is bad. People are overlooked and they get chronically ill. And then the medical establishment says chronic Lyme doesn't exist. And so there's no research funding for it. So it's just a horrible social injustice, and it's a drain on our country. It's destroying families. Mm-hmm. It's destroying the economy. It's sucking our healthcare system dry because a lot of the people who have chronic Lyme might be misdiagnosed with chronic fatigue or mm-hmm. MS or Alzheimer's.
Right.
Dementia is a big deal with untreated Lyme disease.
I was going to say there are probably so many people who've been misdiagnosed because that awareness is not there or the tests aren't correct. I've even thought there, I say I've been diagnosed with MS. I have never really taken ownership over it because I don't know if that's really it. I feel like they just say, well, we don't know what it is, so we're going to diagnose you with this. I mean, the symptoms are so similar and you just don't really know what it is, especially when the tests aren't accurate.
Yeah, and I think Under Our Skin, that film, what it does is it shows a broad range of symptoms if you have this chronic neurological disease. And mm-hmm. you might see a set of symptoms if you're chronically ill that's similar to yours. And, at least it's a simple, pretty inexpensive test. You can start the process of seeing if that's it.
Yeah, well, I feel like if anyone out there is suffering from the symptoms that you've brought up, it's worth a shot. Why wouldn't you go and get tested? Why wouldn't you see if that's an answer if you haven't had an answer yet?
Right, and I've seen a lot of worst case scenarios, so that's why if you pull out a tick, I say treat it seriously. Take cheap, pretty harmless doxycycline and just move on and don't risk the horrible mm-hmm. Symptoms that can happen afterwards.
Right. That could literally ruin your life.
Yeah.
And in some cases, take your life. Is it that detrimental?
Well, I think one thing that's never been studied is the suicides due to Lyme disease. I know my husband and I, at our lowest sick point, we admitted once we were past the scary part and on our way to recovery, we said there were times that we privately thought, I don't know how long I can go on like this. I mean, of course we would never commit suicide because we have 2 kids and we love them dearly, but
the pain is just so much.
It's so uncomfortable to be in your body. Mm-hmm. It's unbelievably horrible.
Is that what made you want to write this book and share with everyone and investigate it even more so because of your direct experience?
Well, yeah. And I just felt the injustice and I just didn't want any other family to go through this. I mean, on some level, my husband and I say, we were lucky we both got it because if one of us had done it, it's such an invisible disease. We wouldn't have had much empathy, but together we weathered it. And,
you both had the experience.
And so that's what the worst part was, the year where we didn't know what we had. And I think it's worth, if you've been suffering from these chronic diseases, to see if that's it, because you can get better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that there's hope, and I love that you're sharing that there is hope and what steps you can take in order to find that out so that you can have those results. We do have a question from the chat room in regards to biological warfare, actually. Did Did you do any research on Japan's Unit 731 during World War II regarding biological warfare testing?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so General Ishii in Japan had a pretty notorious biological weapons program on Chinese mostly, and prisoners of war. He actually did experiment on spirochetes and rickettsias as a weapon. Little balloons with biological weapons that would explode and release pathogens at a certain altitude. So this is a great injustice in World War II because Himmler, under Hitler, also experimented on biological weapons, and the worst offenders went to Nuremberg and were put on trial. But General Ishii and his scientists cooperated with the U.S. and spilled their secrets, and they were given a pass on the war criminal trials. And I know General Ishii did things like put prisoners in really cold climates and had one prisoner pour water over their hands until the fingers fell off. And so the military said, "Oh, this is really interesting frostbite research." So it's just perverse. And Willy Bergdorfer also worked with some of the Germans who worked in the biological weapons program. And he told me they were very nice fellows and they shared their secrets. And in a way, that's what made this sort of bug-borne weapons race happen, because the Russians stole some of the German biological weapons scientists, and we stole some of them. And everybody started getting paranoid about the other guy having more powerful bug-borne weapons. Now, at a certain point, the military said, this is just a stupid idea, because there's always blowback in these weapons. You can't control nature. And that's one reason I wanted to write the book, too, is a cautionary tale. Now we have these tools like CRISPR, which let you cut and paste DNA and RNA. And it's emboldened scientists to do genetically modified insects because they think, oh, we can make mosquitoes sterile, for example, and then we can stem the spread of diseases like Zika that are carried by mosquitoes. But, that's just human hubris to think that we can control it, because nature is so incredibly complex. And recently, the government did an experiment where they released these sterilized mosquitoes, and sure enough, a year later, there were more mosquitoes than ever.
I'm terrified of mosquitoes, and I get bit by them often, and I don't just get a mark. I get bruised, and it's like a deep, dark bruise, like I was pinched or punched or something, and it's always worried me. That's just, they scare me.
There was another operation during, I think it's the 50s, called Operation Big Buzz. So they were working.
Of course there was. Okay.
Yeah, that's I mentioned it in my book, but you can go on the internet and read all about Big Buzz. So what that was they were thinking they could put deadly Trinidad agent virus in mosquitoes and then release them on Vietnam, I think was the plan.
I remember this, yeah.
Test, when to develop a biological weapon, so you do small lab tests, and then you do pilot studies in the wild with uninfected mosquitoes, and then you go to Dugway in Utah and do the infected studies, because they think,
which I live right by.
Who cares about Utah? But what they did with the mosquitoes are they took the mosquito, the same mosquito that spreads Zika and dengue fever. It wasn't really that native, I think, until they released millions of them. But they took them and they released them in poor African American communities, from Plains over Atlanta and then Florida. Then they had military guys dressed up as public health workers collecting mosquitoes from traps that were in homes and interviewing patients to see if anybody got sick. And those are the kind of experiments that happen. And that's why it's not that much of a leap of faith to believe Willie, who discovered Lyme disease and has the most to lose by saying, hey, I covered up really important scientific information and I got the fame for this discovery. So anyways, that's the point I try to make in the book.
There's a lot of shady stuff going down here in Utah. I've heard a lot of things, especially at Dugway, and you've brought that up a couple of times. Do you know anything else that's going on there that you want to share or dare to share?
Well, I'm not really studying Dugway, but I did look into the Skull Valley sheep kill, which I think it's in the 60s, which is super interesting. The military was testing nerve gas, and a bigwig had come from Washington and it was sitting in the air traffic control tower, and they had on the desert floor, they put animals, and then they would fly a plane over and spray nerve gas, and the animals would die horrible deaths. And they were just proving to the Pentagon, see, this is a really effective weapon. It's way cheaper than nuclear warfare, and it's not as long lasting. But what happened is the sprayer leaked, and that night the nerve gas floated up over the mountain range beyond Dugway Proving Grounds over to Skull Valley. And in Skull Valley, there were a bunch of sheep farmers and cattle farmers, mostly of Basque heritage. And they woke up to find all their sheep convulsing on their sides, tongues hanging out, dying in the field. And that was a huge international incident. And a lot of people believe that was the incident where finally the government said, okay, Kissinger, this is enough of this. This is out of control. Mm-hmm. The risks of using this kind of weapon are too great.
Has there been any, upon your research and into biological weapons, has there been anything that has just blown your mind? Like you just never thought could be possible? Like obviously all of this is just mind shocking, but is there anything that you've just been like, okay, this is crazy?
Well, the stuff I could prove, I put in the book. I mean, I was just careful about that. The rumors I've heard, which I wasn't able to substantiate, are disturbing. One is that they were working on weapons that targeted certain races, which I find despicable. And the rumors that we use biological weapons on Koreans and in Vietnam, I think are really disturbing. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've tried to find the unassailable truth on the Vietnamese use, and I haven't found it. Like I said, it's really hard to get these documents, and a lot of them were destroyed after the biological weapons program was stopped in 1972. So we may never know. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if we'll ever know the answers to any of this while we're here. There's just so many shady things going down. You shared a bunch of pictures with us. Is there anything that you shared with us that we haven't talked about yet that you want to show us? Were there any photos, Bill? Is there any photos that we didn't post up yet? I just want to make sure she gets a chance to talk about them. While he's looking though, Kris, do you ever worry about your safety talking about the things that are supposed to be kept on the down low? Do you worry about the investigations that you're doing and the research?
About 2 years into it was pretty clear that what was happening were crimes against humanity, and that there was a lot at stake for the people that made those orders. But once the book was released, now I'm not worried as much. I had people on the inside say, watch your back. But I did have people along the way who were undercover trying to get information about what I had found. Sometimes I knew it right away, and sometimes I figured it out later on, because it's like, well, how did they know that?
What do you mean undercover? What was that experience like?
It was disturbing. Well, every time I went to Rocky Mountain Lab, it's a biolevel 4 lab where the most dangerous weapons are tested. And of course they have security. And I think because of the Patriot Act, they were reading my email. So we went to the hotel bar with my husband and I, and all of a sudden this woman came up and she started randomly chatting about 4 things that had been in my email that week. And they were just bizarre things that wouldn't come up in a normal conversation, like research on fluoridated water and Greek history about the Trojan War. So it's like in Montana at a bar, people just don't come up and talk about the Trojan War and fluoridated water. So anyways, I got back to the hotel room and said to my husband, that was weird. And he goes, that was not a coincidence, so they were reading my email
and just came up and talked to you like it was a casual conversation, like you wouldn't know any better.
Right. And then she has a cover story. Oh, I was a personal assistant when Brad Pitt was filming the Trojan War film in Italy. And, I had a serious head injury. So if I get anything wrong, it's probably because of my serious head injury. It's just like, that is the most.
You can't make this stuff up.
That is a fabricated story.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, Kris.
And then I was working on a second film, and someone calls and says, it's this Army colonel who says, I'm about to retire and I'm going to be a journalist. And I just wanted to ask you questions about what you're working on and stuff. And it turns out he's like the number 2 guy at Walter Reed Army Facility for Veterans Health.
My gosh. That they're not doing a very good job. They're being quite obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, when you write about stuff like this and you're bringing it into, the typical human's awareness, you have to kind of wonder who is watching after you or over you when you're sharing the secrets. You know what I mean? Not to live in fear. I'm sure that's not what I'm trying to say. I don't want to create that energy at all. But I mean, humans are humans. There's good ones and bad ones. There's those who are committed to keeping those secrets locked away.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I feel like you can call it luck or guardian angels. I mean, certain information came to me at just the right time, mm-hmm. and it was completely unexpected. Like, I mean, the biggest breakthrough is in the beginning, Willie Bergdorfer said and told me, I think the outbreak around the Lyme region was caused by a biological weapons accident. So he said that in several different ways without any details. So it was no way to prove it. And then I said, well, this is not a book. This is not a movie because nothing can be proved. And then all of a sudden I get a call out of the blue from this BYU professor, Ron Lindorf. And he says, hey, Willie Bergdorfer just called me and said he has a lot of his personal lab research files that he didn't give to the NIH, who was going to put it in the archive. And he wants me to put it in an archive at BYU. I heard you're writing a biography about, or you're working on a biography about Willie Bergdorfer. Would you like to see it early before it gets put in the archives? And I said, yes. I mean, so that was such a lucky break. There would be no book without those files because I could confirm what he said with government documents. And then there were just all sorts of breadcrumb trails on the other biological experiments they did. Like one of the biological weapons, an incapacitating agent that affects the brain, is Colorado tick fever virus, also called American hemorrhagic fever for the fun of it. And they wanted to make that a weapon too. I don't think it ever got to the deployment stage, but Willie said that he felt really guilty about that.
What is the point of creating these weapons? I know I asked you a similar question earlier, but there are so many. So what is the point?
Well, to destroy an enemy's economy and so you can take over the country. I mean, the nice thing about bug-borne weapons is if it's an incapacitating agent, I mean, I'm speaking like a military commander, you make people sick, but they're not dead, so they can tell you how to run the power plants and the factories, and they won't fight as hard.
Sad.
Combined with conventional weapons. It's to me, it's pure evil. And I would say it was really hard for me after doing the film and seeing the suffering across the nation and the world, and then to read that the military people thought this was okay. And like one of the most devastating documents I found, and it's on my website, was some bean counter did calculations on cost per death for various biological weapons that they use. So, for example, tick-borne tularemia, which they ended up aerosolizing as a germ. They said using the tick is no good. I mean, they said it costs $1.33 a death. What a deal compared to a nuclear weapon.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Great.
So a human life in $1977 is $1.33.
You know, I have a really great question from one of my producers. I want to ask you this. Does creating the weapons also put us ahead for vaccinations or antibiotics or treatment in general?
Well, I guess that is a benefit of the biological weapons program. Those scientists had to really understand immunology, and they would never deploy a biological weapon in a enemy territory without protecting their own soldiers, in theory. So part of the process of, refining the weapon itself was, do we have a way to protect soldiers? And I think that's probably why they never really did a serious spotted fever weapon, because no one's developed a really good vaccine for that. And so there would always be blowback where your soldiers would die. Or they did a test over Dugway called Big Itch, where they dropped fleas over a battalion-sized area in Dugway. And they dropped uninfected fleas just to see how far they would hop and how many animals they would infect. And they said most of the people on the plane got flea bites. So it was impossible to control insects.
Yeah, I mean, of course it is. Of course it is. I'm looking over your website again. For those of you who are not there, I recommend you going to Kris Newby, which is KrisNewby.com. There is a tab there that says images, and there you'll see tons of photos, some of which we've shared here. If you're watching for video, but I cannot believe how far back this goes, and that it's such a huge problem even still. Well, probably more so because it's more in awareness. And all of the documents that you have. Wow.
Well, one of the action items that I have in the last chapter of the book is just to the researchers. I mean, I tried to make it very scientifically pegged and accurate with lots of footnotes and sources, because my call to action for the scientists are, please help figure out, first of all, to the government, release these documents. It happened 50 years ago. All the people who said yes to these projects are dead. And it's in the public's best interest to know what organisms were dropped in what regions. And also what protective research was done as far as vaccines and spread, and it'll save dollars. I mean, if we know what germs were released in northern Wisconsin and Minnesota versus what was released in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, where they had the giant vats where they grew and stored all these biological weapons. Arkansas is hit, and Tennessee and Kentucky, they're hit really hard with these organisms right now. And are they related to what was being grown in the vats? It would help researchers figure out what treatments and frontline physicians on what to diagnose there.
Well, that makes
one
sense.
of the big exciting things that happened with the book, and it was a total surprise, was a month after the book came out in 2019, Representative Kris Smith from New Jersey held it up in a C-SPAN meeting where they were deciding on the budget for the Department of Defense for the following year. And he said, hey, look at this book, Bitten. There's some credible information that the military released ticks and some were weaponized, and we need the military to investigate this and release those documents. And that this would be, there's precedence for this. There's Agent Orange and the Shipboard Hazard Group, where the soldiers who released Agent Orange got sick from that. And there's government reparations for the people who got sick in the line of duty. So he's introduced an amendment to the DoD bill twice to tell the government to release these documents so we can get our public better. But it got voted out 2 years in a row. So that was a little disappointing.
Right. Why though? You know, when these things happen, why are they choosing not to share with the public? Why would that even be in consideration?
Well, the lawsuits would be devastating. It'd be
I
really
know, but I can't wrap my head around it. Like the good versus evil, right? That's how I look at it. Like, why would we not want our people to be healthy and well? Let's just keep everything from them. It just doesn't make any sense logically to me at all.
And some of the cynical people say that, well, there's no motivation for pharma to find better cure and researchers to find better cures for Lyme disease because those patients make more money being sick, taking blockbuster drugs like the MS drugs like Enbrel and Humira and the pain drugs, the opiates. Certainly there's precedent with pharma turning the other way and overprescribing opiates to make money.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing with many diseases.
I try not to go there. That's a dark place and just focus on cheerleading to the researchers. Hey, the evidence is out there. Let's get it. Let's get these people better.
No, that's a great direction to go. I agree. I never care talking about the other side because it makes you dark. It makes you depressed and feel hopeless. And we definitely don't want that. There is, I just lost it. There was a document in here I wanted to ask you about, but until I remember and to go back to it, you brought up Agent Orange, and I remember reading a little bit about you and your father having a conversation in regards to that experience. Will you share that with us?
Yeah, that was eye-opening. So, along the way, my dad, he was in naval intelligence, he was a contractor with the CIA. So he'd seen some stuff. But when he was a pilot, a really young pilot, he was told, load these green drums with orange band in the middle. This is a really, really top secret load. So they loaded them in the hold, and then they didn't tell until they were in the air over the ocean where they were going, and then they went to Vietnam, and they said, it's a 40-hour burn rate or whatever. So if there's a fire on board, you need to parachute out, or this is all going to explode. And so he found out when he landed that this was this new thing called Agent Orange, which in Vietnam was used as a defoliant. So it's part of the Dietrich program, but on anti-crop side. So they would spray this on the jungles because the guerrilla warfare was brutal against us with the Viet Cong and the Vietnamese. So they would spray this, and a couple weeks later, all the plants would die, so they couldn't hide out in the jungle. And what they found out later was it caused horrible birth defects and had lasting health effects on the people, and both our side and their side. Just really tragic. And so recently there was a lawsuit against the CIA, and so there are reparations for soldiers who were exposed to it and now have cancers and autoimmune issues, skin conditions cause
Yeah,
from.
I've noticed that. That's a question if you go to a healthcare provider, if you were ever exposed.
Yeah, at the VA. That's what prompted my dad to tell me about it. He somehow didn't think that I would care about it. I don't know
You're like,
why.
hello, Dad.
I was really upset when he told me about it. But he went to the VA. He moved down closer to us, and he went to the VA, and that was the first question: have you ever been exposed to Agent Orange? Well, yeah.
Yeah, it's such a different time, but then again, not really. I mean, we're still doing the same things. We're still having a lot of those same experiences. They just look different.
Well, the government's still more secretive than ever.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I just wish there was more transparency.
I do too. What do you feel about the planes that are spraying whatever it is into the air? I see them a lot here where I live. I've been told it's this or that. What's your opinion?
Well, I'm a mechanical engineer by training, so I think a lot of it are just contrails where byproducts of combustion just crystallizes at certain altitudes, and it looks like they're spraying vapors, but it's really just water crystals. But I know people who have researched it deeply and believe it. I can't really go there because to me it just looks like contrails.
Yeah. Yeah, your scientific brain. Your engineer brain. No, that makes sense. I mean, it does. And I figure when you see those types of trails, there's some kind of explanation, but I obviously am not an engineer or a scientist. I'm on the other side of my brain. I'm not that person. So thank you for being one. We still have about 10 more minutes, and I have another question for you. So
okay.
Some people say mad scientists, if you will. How do you think these scientists feel working on developing and maintaining delicate biological projects and programs?
Well, as far as the Cold War programs, I think a lot of them didn't know what they were doing. It was very compartmentalized. Willie, however, knew, I think almost from the beginning. He worked on Q fever in Switzerland, which is one of the go-to bioweapons for us. And that's a nasty germ. It's sort of in the rickettsial family. And I talked to experts that said you can breathe in 3 organisms and get sick, which is super powerful. But anyways, I think most people didn't know. And then I asked Willie that question, and he said, well, you don't ask questions. You suspect it because you want to sleep at night. And I had a lot of Willie's letters, and it was some of them just broke my heart because it really drove a wedge in his family, the work he did. Mm-hmm. He first came over from Switzerland, and he immediately started putting plague in fleas. So plague is a bacterium that at various times has almost wiped the human race off the planet. So he's putting plague in fleas, and they would drop, the plan was to drop the infected fleas on the enemy. And then he would go home and he had a new baby. And, it brings new meaning to not bringing your work home at night. And he couldn't talk about his work. And so it was just interesting seeing the arc of his understanding of what he did. I mean, in the beginning, he thought it was exciting. He was just a lowly researcher in Europe, and he came here and he got his own lab. And yeah, he had to do these government projects, but he had assistants to help him, and he could do side projects that were really interesting to him. He liked relapsing fever Borrelia a lot. He studied that with his mentor Geige in Europe. And then he got to go fly around to Egypt and Fort Detrick and go to top secret meetings, and he felt important. But I think, from a family where your dad is in secret work, it really is harmful to your family to keep these secrets. I mean, I see a lot of successful peers, and, their dads and their moms were doctors or lawyers, and they share a lot of wisdom about what they've learned in their careers. And that doesn't happen in these secret military projects. So I think it's harmful for kids.
Yeah, of course, absolutely, for so many reasons. But um, I feel like anytime there are secrets, especially ones that can be so detrimental like these, is devastating on anyone that's involved. And
How
and
do you keep up your spirits when you're sick? Like what things help you?
um that's a good question. You know, lately it's been challenging because the weather has been so fluctuating, and that does affect me deeply.
Mm-hmm.
And I do my best not to go dark because, you know, you feel like, oh, my body's betraying me. I'm so sick of being sick. But I don't want to be in that mindset that my body is acting the way that it acts. And so my biggest thing are words of affirmations. Like, my body is strong. I'm healing. I do my best not to say I'm sick because I don't feel like I am sick. I just feel like there are some things going on in my body that need to be addressed. So words are really, really big. And then I do things that create happiness. And so if I have the energy, I'll paint, or I'll go on a walk, or I'll do things that bring me joy. If I don't have that much energy, I have found that hobbies where I can actually like still relax. So, you know, doodling, I love to doodle, or even playing with my crystals, meditating, doing more of the spiritual things. I just feel more connected that there's a bigger purpose to why I'm having these experiences. And so I look at it as an experience to have gratitude and be thankful for what I am able to do.
Yeah. And to me, helping other people avoid the abyss that we did is therapeutic to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Art has been my biggest healer. That I teach art journaling and work with people one-on-one to heal through creation, because it was such a huge tool for me and still is. You get a kind of escape. You know, you forget about how you're feeling on the inside and the outside because you're creating a different reality. And so it's been really helpful for me. So if I could recommend anything to anyone, I would say find something that you love to do, that you're capable of doing, even when you're not feeling your best self.
Yeah. And I would just say, keep trying to get better. I mean,
yeah, always.
There's a lot of really good research coming out. And I think actually the silver lining of the COVID epidemic is that we've learned how to speed up science and work together more.
Yeah.
And new approaches like the mRNA might benefit Lyme disease eventually.
Yeah. Well, you know, I wish you and all of those who are having this experience with Lyme disease success in recovering and healing their bodies. I'm grateful to you for the time and effort you have taken to get this information out to all of us and continue sharing with the world. It's so important that we know your experience and your husband's experience and what's being done to, you know, heal everyone who is having this experience. So thank you very much, Kris. I appreciate your time and your efforts and your dedication, and for pushing through what was horrible for you, to come out at the end of it in a place where you're able to share that experience as well as the positive that's come from it. So thank you very much. Before we wrap, I do want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to get in touch with you, get a copy of your book, and to also watch the documentary. So if you'll share that with us in closing.
Yes. So you can order the book. It's through HarperCollins website and through any of the bookstores, the major bookstores, or Amazon. And it's available on audio or Kindle, because I know that's important for people with Lyme disease because they have trouble reading, stigmatisms, or vision issues. And then the film, of course, Amazon.com or on the the website for the film, and you don't have to watch the whole thing. It's an hour and a half, but there are also snippets of it. And I think the big value of the film is you can see that you're not alone if you're feeling these illnesses, and you might get some ideas on which tick-borne disease you have. And it explains why the disease is controversial to some degree. It is complicated, but you get the big picture on why research has really been frozen for a while because of this controversy, and we need to get beyond that.
Yes, I agree. And thanks to you and your team for making that happen and sharing that with us. Thank you again, Kris. It has just been absolutely wonderful learning more, even though it is terrifying in a lot of ways. Knowledge is power, though, I believe, and really knowing and how to protect ourselves and to bring awareness to these experiences, just phenomenal. So thank you for showing up.
Well, thank you for inviting me on and letting me share my story.
Yeah, and I love that you're here in Utah now. Congratulations. And in a beautiful place. You live in a beautiful area.
It's snowing so much now. It's just really deep.
Isn't that weird? I woke up to that and I was like, what is happening? Yeah, it doesn't help. I didn't even know it was going to storm, but my body did.
Yeah. Oh, it was sad.
Yeah. All right. Well, you take care of yourself and we'll be in touch. I'd love to have you back with more when you have more information or want to share your book again. I know that everyone has just been really active in the chat room. So thank you. Thank you again.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
And to all of you, thank you for being here with us and all the support you give to my show, Soul Wanderings, and KGRA. It's such a great station, right? I'm glad to have you guys here. Let's keep having these conversations, like I always say. They bring awareness and connection to our experiences. Have a good night, everyone, and take care.